Now, I'm very happy to say that we have Rachel Blevins on the line, my colleague from RT America and an adornment to the mother of all talk shows. Rachel, thanks for joining us on a busy night. Let me put to you something that was just put to me from the Bahamas. There was apparently a recount in Arizona, and Joe Biden won it even more than was announced at the time. Does this mark the end, do you think, of Donald Trump's obsessiveness on the last election, which if he doesn't shift onto the next election, he may very well lose his chance?
You know, it's interesting that we haven't gotten an announcement from him on on the next election, rather. And exactly as you're saying, we continue to hear these statements from him. I don't think it's the end just quite yet, because in this specific case, when it comes to Arizona, there's an interesting report going around on social media, and it kind of has something for everyone. On one hand, it says, you know, Biden took away more votes than they even previously thought before. But then on the other hand, it also mentions that there are a few thousand irregularities in there, which is to say that there were some duplicated votes, or there were people who had voted when they shouldn't have voted, when they were actually voting in another state, that kind of thing. So when you have a report like that, even with a number of people saying, no, this isn't the case, or saying, hey, we shouldn't focus on those irregularities, well, Donald Trump and his party that is exactly what they're going to focus on. And that's kind of what we're seeing with them now. And I know that a number of his supporters are really taking things like this, even though it's something where it's not going to change the outcome of the election that we saw last year. That is something that they're still focusing on. Now, my question to them would be, what are you going to do to ensure that the next election isn't like that you take care of all of those irregularities? And that really should be something that Trump should really focus on, and kind of do that pivot to where he says, okay, we didn't like the way that it turned out the last time around. Now, what are we going to do moving forward? We haven't quite seen that just yet, but who knows? Time will tell.
He's still on the stump. I saw him giving a speech in which he swore, actually. I was quite surprised at that, given the Bible-belting base that he had extraordinarily. Have to wonder why anyone that carried around a Bible would be quite so affectionate about Donald Trump, who's a sinner if ever I saw one. But he's certainly still packing them in, isn't he?
He is, and you'd be surprised. I've met more than one person who believes that Trump was anointed by God. And so, yes, he still has that movement of people that follow him. And even what we've seen over the last year, it's really reinforced it, because the people who support Trump, they see him as someone who isn't just a political figure. They still see him as someone who is anti-establishment and who is taking on the establishment as if he's different than every other person who said that they were going to take on the establishment. And that's been fascinating and almost terrifying to watch, because in the 4 years that Trump was in office, he really didn't change that much, especially when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, especially when it comes to these hallmark things that Democrats and Republicans magically seem to agree on. He didn't make any meaningful, lasting changes in those areas. And yet you very much do still have a force of people that are following him as if he is some sort of chosen leader. And I think that we are going to continue to see that play out, especially as we're looking to the next election.
What did you think of the dress? I thought she looked quite nice in it, actually.
AOC's dress from last week, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of those, you know, you got to wonder what they have whenever it comes to these public relations teams that each of these politicians have. Someone told her that that was a good idea. You know, she claims she didn't pay the $30,000 for the ticket. But I mean, this is the same politician, when we're talking about AOC, that whenever it came this week to the House of Representatives specifically passing funding for $1 billion in funding for Israel's Iron Dome, she voted present on it. And it's not like she had the deciding vote on it. I mean, I think the total was like 422-9. So it wasn't as if she would have made the deciding
factor. Now, just
for
for British viewers and listeners, voting present is the equivalent of abstaining, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know why they get that option, but they do. And she was one of the few Democrats to actually just vote present on it, and then came out with this long statement after it. And it serves as a reminder, at least it should, to every American, that this is the political elite you are dealing with. They come together whenever it comes to, like this week, we also saw them pass $778 billion for the National Defense Authorization Act. They're looking at increasing defense spending even more than in previous years, even more than what the Biden administration was asking for. And yet on the other token, they're saying, well, look at us, we're, ramping down on U.S. presence in the Middle East, but then they're coming together to pass that much in funding. I mean, that should make you wonder right there what they have planned if they're not spending it on the wars that they claim that they're bringing to an end.
Well, let's dwell on that subject, if you will. Israel is a rich country. It gives free healthcare to all its citizens. It gives free university and schooling to all of its citizens. It's a country that has many of the things that you don't have.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't it pay for its own Iron Dome? Why should American taxpayers, who don't have any of these things, be paying a country that does have all of these things?
Yeah, I wish you could ask that same question to all of the members of Congress who stand there and support it, because they really do turn it into almost a religion and saying that this is our ally and we need to support them. And yes, anyone in that political body who takes a step back and says, wait a second, why are we funding this when the United States itself has hundreds of thousands of people who are homeless on any given night, when we have children who are in schoolrooms that are absolutely falling apart, when we have people who are struggling to gain access to basic health care, when we as a country are not functioning in a way that we would even wish on our close ally Israel, it really does make you wonder, wait a second, why are we pouring so much money not only into their country, but also at the same time, why are we looking at increasing our defense budget and our defense spending even more? And what they do is they focus on these trigger words. They get up there and they say, oh, well, Israel's our ally, so that can't be questioned. Or they say, oh, well, China is upgrading their military. They have a military, basically, is what they're actually saying. So the United States has to make sure to continue to spend more money on our military. Meanwhile, they're wasting trillions of dollars on building, new planes and new jets, much like the F-35 program, I believe it was, that was just a colossal failure. And then they just kind of shrug their shoulders and they're like, oh, our bad, we wasted trillions on that.
Exactly. Now, the big story, isn't it, in the U.S. at the moment, is the mandate from the president that all state federal employees have to be vaccinated. Is there any pushback against that?
We have seen some pushback that's more on a state-by-state basis, which is you have states like Texas and like Florida that are passing all-out laws saying we will not do any kind of vaccine mandate here. And I think that that's really where we're going to kind of get the federal versus state control kind of debate going, because, of course, for the Biden administration's point, they can have a mandate that goes just towards federal employees. But now what they're seeing is pushback specifically from people like law enforcement, firefighters, groups of people who have made our society run. And now all of a sudden they're looking at possibly being out of a job in the next couple of weeks if they don't get the vaccine. And then on the other token, you have, the Biden administration pushing possible booster shots. And I know for a lot of people that has created a lot of frustration, because you have millions of Americans who they feel like have done their duty in getting the first shot, getting the second shot. Now they're looking at being told that they need to get a third shot. And it just kind of gets to that point where you have people saying, not only where does this end, but is the United States really giving its best? And are we in a position where we're doing everything that we can to protect ourselves? And so I think that is a debate that you're going to continue to see evolve, especially in the months to come, especially when it is, the individual states that are then fighting back against the federal government.
Joe Biden still alive at the time of interview?
That he is. And, I think to your point, I think that you can argue not only that he's old and senile, but also that Trump has a range of issues as well. I mean, unfortunately, we are in a situation in the United States where people continue to be in sort of this left versus right paradigm where they feel like if you say something bad about one side, then that means that you automatically support the other side. And I'm here to tell you that you can criticize them both equally and that there is nothing wrong with that.
Remember her name, Rachel Blevins. She'll be in the Congress one day, and she won't turn up at $30,000 a night Met Gala, and she won't wear a daft dress sending a ridiculous slogan on the back of it, even though she'd look even nicer than AOC in that dress. Rachel Blevins,
thank you, George.
Thank you for joining us.